Welcome back, everyone, to another amazing story.
Always great to be back.
Today, we are diving into something pretty intriguing, the work of Armando Martí.
Okay.
He is a Colombian mentalist, and his work, it really brings up these questions, about what the human mind is capable of. Like, what are the boundaries of the human mind? And, are there things out there that we just can't explain with science?
Yeah.
And, Marty's known for being able to, like, tap into something almost like he's listening to someone's soul, is what some people have said.
Wow. Okay. So right away, I mean, we're talking about someone who is working in this space where, on the one hand, we have science and what we know about the mind. And then on the other hand, there's all this stuff that, well, we just don't have explanations for, right?
Exactly.
So this is a real tangible example for people listening, because I think we all grapple with that. Like,
Yeah.
what are the limits of what we know?
Exactly.
What's out there beyond what we can explain?
Exactly. And that is really the heart of this deep dive today.
Yeah.
We've gathered a bunch of articles and they detail his life, his background, and then also some really interesting cases where he was involved in investigations. And the goal today is really to just kind of go through all that, and explore his background, look at his methods, examine like what evidence is out there about these claims that he makes so that you listening, you can form your own opinion. You can decide for yourself what you think.
Sounds good.
Okay. Oh, and before we go any further, just a quick reminder, if you're enjoying this deep dive, please do us a huge favor and leave a like and subscribe, and also let us know in the comments if you have a topic you'd like us to cover.
Always looking for new ideas.
Exactly. All right, so let's jump in. Armando Martí, he was born in Bogota, Colombia in 1967. And even as a child, there are all these stories about him experiencing the world really differently from other kids. Yeah. Like he had these vivid, lucid dreams, unusual visions, and then this like really deep curiosity about death. Like what happens after we die, which, I mean, a lot of kids think about that. But with him, it seemed to be like a really central focus.
Right.
Yeah. And so, in a lot of accounts of people who are said to have, these heightened intuitive abilities, you often hear about this kind of early sensitivity, like they're just processing the world differently.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like their senses are tuned to something else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like they're picking up on different frequencies or something.
Right.
And it's not just these experiences. I mean, his education is really fascinating, too. He studied all sorts of things, psychology, philosophy, and then all these alternative therapies, both in Colombia and abroad. Like, we're talking clinical hypnosis, NLP, logotherapy, which focuses on finding meaning in life, spiritual coaching, transcendental meditation.
Whoa, that's quite a range.
I know, right?
Really eclectic. Like, it speaks to this really deep intellectual curiosity, doesn't it? Like, he's trying to understand the human experience from all these different angles.
Exactly. But what's interesting is that, the sources we looked at, they all emphasize that, like, his biggest lessons, his deepest learning actually came from his personal contact with people and like from witnessing human suffering.
So more than just, like, book knowledge, it was real-world experience that shaped him.
Yeah,
Makes sense, right? Especially if you're dealing with things like, trying to understand the soul and stuff.
totally.
That's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, it's like he believes that, true understanding, it comes from empathy, from really experiencing and connecting with people's pain and struggle.
Makes sense to me.
So, all of this, it kind of led him to become an author.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. He's written books like, I'll try my best to pronounce these, Las Estaciones del Alma, Huellas del Despertar, and El Despertar del Ángel Interior. And his books, they're really interesting. They kind of weave together, personal stories and spiritual reflections. It's like he's inviting the reader to go on this journey of self-discovery.
Yeah, so if we step back and look at the big picture, it's like everything he's done, it all points to this really deep interest in understanding what it means to be human. Right.
Yeah.
Both the psychological side of things and the spiritual side.
Exactly.
And his writing, it's like an extension of that. It's a way for him to share these insights with more people.
Exactly. And it's not just writing. He also works as a life coach and an emotional advisor for, well, actually a pretty diverse group of people. Yeah, companies, public figures, and even some Colombian state organizations.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It is. And what's really interesting is that his approach, it's not about just giving people quick fixes,
No,
It's about really helping them to transform themselves from the inside out.
that sounds more like lasting change, right?
Yeah.
It's not just putting a Band-Aid on the problem.
Exactly. And, this probably comes from his background, right? Like his understanding of psychology and then all these other things he studied.
Yeah, it's like he's got this whole toolkit to draw from.
Right. He seems to really believe that if you want to make real change, you got to address the root causes, the stuff going on beneath the surface.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
But here's where things get really interesting, because Martí also has another role, one that's, a lot more mysterious.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He's considered a medium, or as he puts it, an interpreter of the soul.
Whoa, okay. So this is where we get into the unexplained, right?
Yeah, this is where it goes from conventional to something else entirely.
I can see why this guy's so fascinating. I mean, this claim that he can access information that's like beyond our normal senses, that's what really grabs people's attention. And of course, it also makes some people really skeptical.
For sure. And there are some specific instances where Colombian authorities have actually asked for his help. Yeah. The sources talk about this case where two sisters, their father had disappeared.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just gone, no trace. And the police, they'd hit a dead end.
I can imagine how desperate they must have been.
I know. And, this is often when people, families especially, but sometimes even law enforcement, they start to look for answers in less conventional places.
Right, because what else can you do when you've tried everything else?
Exactly. So in this case, Marty, he used a technique called stimulation sensorial progressiva with one of the daughters. It's basically a form of hypnotic induction, and the idea is to try and access deep memories or even, like intuitive visions.
So from a psychological perspective, it's like you're trying to bypass the conscious mind.
Yeah.
Like the part of you that analyzes and thinks logically.
Yeah.
And maybe tap into something deeper, more subconscious.
Exactly. And of course, the big question is, can you actually get information that way that's like beyond what the person has experienced directly?
Right. That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah. But here's what's really crazy. The daughter, during the session, she gave a super detailed description of this place. She'd never been there before, but she described it perfectly. A rural road, a concrete structure, a stream. And then, guess what? A few days later, they found the father's body at that exact location.
No way.
Yeah, it's like, how did she know? How could she have possibly described that place so accurately if she'd never been there?
That's pretty unsettling, I have to admit. It makes you wonder.
And that wasn't the only time. The sources say that Martí, he's been called in on other missing person cases and unsolved crimes too. Often he's working in the shadows, like behind the scenes.
In the shadows. That's interesting. It makes it sound like the authorities are maybe a little uncomfortable with the whole thing, right?
Yeah, or maybe it's strategic. Like they want the information, but they don't want to publicly acknowledge that they're using a medium.
Yeah, I can see how that would be tricky. Public perception and all that.
Exactly.
Plus, the whole thing is hard to explain scientifically. So it's like they're in this gray area. They want the results, but they don't want the controversy.
Exactly. And, there's no denying that there's been a lot of controversy around his work.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And part of that is because he actually used to work as an advisor in the Colombian Attorney General's office.
Okay, so that's where his more conventional work and his unconventional work kind of collided, right?
Yeah. Officially, his role was to help with the staff's emotional well-being, but he was also consulted on some really sensitive investigations.
I see. So you've got this situation where he's wearing two hats, and that obviously opens the door for a lot of scrutiny.
Definitely. And it eventually led to a formal investigation into his involvement in some judicial processes.
Wow, a full-blown investigation. That's serious.
It was. They were looking into whether he had acted improperly, but in the end, he was exonerated, and the case was dismissed because there wasn't enough evidence.
So it was like they couldn't prove he'd done anything wrong, but the suspicion remained.
Yeah, pretty much. And after all that, he decided to step back from working with institutions and just focus on his private practice.
Okay, so he went back to working directly with individuals who wanted his help.
Exactly. Doing private sessions, talks, writing books, leading retreats, that kind of thing.
Makes sense. It's like he's creating his own space where he can do his work without all the bureaucracy and scrutiny.
Yeah, exactly. And, as you can imagine, people's opinions about him are pretty divided.
I bet.
He's had tons of followers who think he's incredibly gifted and insightful, but then there are others who are super skeptical about his abilities.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're talking about stuff that goes against our current understanding of science, right?
Right.
So it's only natural for people to have different opinions. I mean, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Exactly.
And when you don't have that kind of evidence, well, you're going to have both believers and skeptics.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And it really makes you think about all the other stories out there, both real and fictional, about people who say they can help solve crimes using these, unconventional methods.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, the sources mention the Munoz sisters, who also went to Martí for help finding their missing father.
Oh, right. This sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's kind of like that first case we talked about. Gloria Munoz, she described this place near La Tebaida during a session with Martí.
And she'd never been there before.
Nope. But she gave all these details. A dirt road, her father near a river, a broken window, and even the sound of airplanes.
Okay, so again, we've got this really specific information that turns out to be accurate.
Exactly. They found her father's body by a stream near a house. His legs were in the water.
Wow.
And that thing about the airplanes, it might mean that the place was close to an airport,
Yeah,
which adds another layer of accuracy to her vision.
it does. It's pretty compelling.
Right. It's like, how do you explain that?
Yeah.
And, it's hard not to think about TV shows like Medium.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It was based on a real person, Alison DuBois, who claimed to help the police solve crimes.
I remember that show. It was pretty popular.
It was. And, it really taps into this fascination that people have with these kinds of abilities. The idea that someone could communicate with the dead or see things that others can't.
Right. And the fact that it was based on a real person, that just makes it even more intriguing.
Totally. And there's actually research on Alison DuBois. Dr. Gary Schwartz, he studied her, and he claims that her accuracy rate was over 80%.
Wow, over 80%.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah. But, research in this area, it's not always straightforward.
Right.
Like, how do you define and measure accuracy in these cases? It's not always clear-cut.
Yeah, I can see how that would be tricky.
Definitely. And, there are other psychics who've reportedly worked with detectives too, like Sharon Neal in the UK.
Okay.
She worked on the Marie Payne case, and she had this vision of the initials C and E, which ended up matching the suspect.
Oh, wow. So again, really specific details.
Yeah. And then there's Kathleen Rea in California. She helped solve a murder case. And she mentioned feathers and a dog, which were both relevant to the crime scene.
Okay. So all these anecdotal accounts, they're definitely interesting to think about.
Yeah.
But, we have to be careful because memory can be unreliable and people can interpret things differently.
Right.
But, the level of detail in some of these cases is hard to ignore.
It really is. And it gets even crazier when you consider that even intelligence agencies like the CIA and the KGB, they've supposedly explored using psychics.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah. I mean, if that's true, it's like even these super rational, security-focused organizations, they're open to the possibility that there might be something to this.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
Right. And then there's Dorothy Allison's prediction in the Patricia Hearst kidnapping case.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
She predicted that Hearst would become involved with her captors, and that's exactly what happened.
Right. That case got a lot of attention because her prediction came true.
Yeah. But, not all psychic predictions are accurate.
Of course not. If they were always right, that would change everything, wouldn't it?
It really would. And, the sources mention the Chandra Levy disappearance as an example where psychics didn't help.
Right. So it's important to look at both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
The successes and the failures.
Exactly. And, in fiction, there are shows that take a more skeptical view of psychics, like The Mentalist and Psych.
Oh, yeah, those are good shows.
Yeah, they're fun. And then there was that show in the UK, Psychic Challenge.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
The winner, Diane Lazarus, she's actually worked with the London police.
Really? So this isn't just like a Colombian thing. It's happening all over the world.
Exactly.
It's like there's this persistent interest in the potential of psychic abilities, both from the public and from law enforcement.
Yeah, it's fascinating. But, we have to acknowledge the skeptical viewpoint.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Joe Nickell, he makes some really good points. He says that a lot of the information that psychics give is really vague.
Yeah.
Like he uses examples like the number 7 or water.
Right, and that's a common criticism, isn't it?
Yeah. The idea is that those kinds of general details, they could apply to tons of cases.
Yeah.
So it seems like a hit, but it could just be a coincidence.
Exactly.
And Nickell also points out that water is everywhere, right? It's a super common element. So of course it's going to come up in a lot of cases.
Yeah, good point.
And he says that people tend to focus on the successes and ignore the failures.
Which is understandable, right?
Yeah. It's like we want to believe, so we remember the times when it works and forget the times when it doesn't.
Totally.
And then there's the ethical concern that some psychics might be looking at case files,
Oh, right.
which would obviously invalidate their claims.
Yeah, if they already know the details, it's not really psychic ability, is it?
Exactly. But, there are cases that are harder to explain away. Like the sources mention the Jockey Pool murder
Right.
case. The psychic, Christine Holohan, she gave a bunch of details that were later confirmed by the crime scene.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And there was a study in the Journal of the Society for Physical Research that found a really high percentage of her details matched the actual crime scene.
Hmm. That's pretty compelling.
It is. But, even with these kinds of cases, there's a lot of reluctance to publicly acknowledge that mediums were involved.
Really?
Yeah. Urban Hoyos, he's a journalist, and he saw Martí working with families of kidnapping victims.
Okay.
And he said that the authorities would never admit to using a brujo, which is like a witch doctor or shaman,
Yeah.
even if it helped them solve a case.
Yeah, I could see how that would be like a PR nightmare.
Right, like they'd be afraid of losing credibility.
Totally.
And Hoyos, he actually saw family members in trances induced by Martí give information that was then used to find missing people.
Wow, so he witnessed it firsthand.
Yeah, and, as a journalist, you'd think he'd be pretty skeptical.
Yeah, you'd expect him to be pretty objective.
Exactly. But he saw it with his own eyes.
That's pretty significant.
It is. And then there's one of the Munoz sisters. She spoke anonymously, but she said that Martí's help was invaluable.
Okay.
But she's afraid to say so publicly because she doesn't want people to make fun of her.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's hard to talk about these kinds of experiences when they go against what most people believe.
Totally.
So it's like this catch-22
Yeah.
to have this potentially amazing resource, but people are afraid to use it openly because of the stigma.
Exactly. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's clear that Armando Martí, he's a really complex figure.
Definitely.
He's got this background in psychology and these alternative therapies, and he's a respected author and life coach.
Right.
But then he's also got this other side, this ability to tap into something beyond the ordinary.
Yeah.
And we've seen cases where his insights, which he often gets through this stimulation sensorial progressiva technique, have led to real discoveries in missing person cases.
Right. And those cases are hard to explain away.
They really are.
Yeah.
But, there's still so much mystery around this whole phenomenon.
For sure.
Some people believe wholeheartedly, others are totally skeptical. And official institutions, well, they seem to be somewhere in between.
Yeah, it's this gray area where, like, you want answers, but you're not sure what to make of the methods.
Exactly. But I think this deep dive, it really challenges us to think outside the box.
It does.
To consider that maybe there are things out there that we just don't understand yet.
Right. Like, what if our understanding of the human mind is just the tip of the iceberg?
Exactly. And that brings me to a final thought for you all listening. What if Armando Martí really does have these abilities? What if there's more to us than we realize? And what if there are connections between things that we think are separate, like the physical world, and something beyond? It's definitely something to think about.
It is. It makes you wonder what else might be possible.
It really does. Thanks for joining us for another amazing story.
Until next time.
See you then.